Georgia Tech gets humbled. State embarrasses the Atlantic Coast Conference. But don't worry, Wuffie. The newcomer's cow will carry your stinking weight. Huddle up.
You don't want none! You don't want none!
Ready, break. What's going on, ACC football family? It is your favorite North Carolinian, Russ, the Tar Heel. And in this huddle, baby, we're going to talk about the Week 2 slate of the ACC football games, my predictions, and how well I did. But before we do that, man, just take a second, look down there and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. And if you actually like the video, do your boy a favor, like the video. So let's jump into this thing, man, starting with the boys at BYU taking on Southern Methodist, bro. And my score prediction was 38-24. And I started off with a stinking L. Completely misjudged this one. BYU comes into Dallas and hands the Mustangs an 18-15 loss. Here I am thinking it's going to be some sort of stinking shootout, and it ends up being a really ugly football game. Turned out to be a defensive struggle. BYU had 336 yards of total offense compared to only 261 for the Stangs. And both Kevin Jennings and Preston Stone could not get anything going, man. Crazy that, you know, the boys out there in Dallas are supposed to be some offensive juggernaut, and they put up 15 points at home against BYU, dude. That's a tough loss for the newcomers who were supposed to be some sort of dark horse in the Atlantic Coast Conference for some reason. But BYU's not a slouch. Not a good look. Your boy starts off the week 0-1. Moving on. Puget Northwestern. My prediction. It was that Duke would win 20-13 in some kind of defensive struggle. And you know what? That's basically what it was. It just took 2 overtimes for the outcome to come to fruition. Puke wins 26-20 against the Northwestern Wildcats. Now, Malik Murphy had 3 touchdown passes, 242 yards passing, and the Dukies held Northwestern to 288 yards of total offense at that little temporary stadium that Northwestern is playing at. So Duke moves to 2-0 on the season, and Manny has that defense humming to a certain extent right now, man, which is kind of interesting because they lost a lot of pieces. But Manny Diaz is a defensive guy. We'll see if he can hold that, you know, when the competition starts to stiffen. Duke moves to 2-0, and that puts me at 1-1 for the week. Now, kind of a shocker, man. Moving on to the Georgia Tech-Syracuse game. I had Georgia Tech winning 30-21 up there at the Q's. I thought there was no stinking way that Syracuse was going to be able to stop the run. How does Ohio rush for like 250-plus yards against Syracuse with multiple touchdowns, and then Tech comes up there and they're only able to muster 112 yards? Come on, man. Who in the world could have saw that coming? Yeah, they had 3 rushing touchdowns, but it wasn't enough to outdo Kyle McCord, who lit that stinking Georgia Tech defense up for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns. Shoof! Arondé Gadsden II, bro, he showed why he's one of the best tight ends in the entire conference by having 6 receptions for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Trebor Pena also had 6 receptions for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Are the Qs actually good with Kyle McCord back there, man? Or did Tech just get a little bit too big for their britches? The final score wasn't even close to indicative of how lopsided this football game actually was at one point. The final was 31-28. But that was Tech making a push right there at the end of the game, and they were playing Syracuse's soft defense. They were obviously trying to keep everything in front of them and keep the game as short as possible. That moves me to 1-2 to start the stinking week, bro. Yikes. And then I almost stubbed my toe again when we go to the Pitt-Cincinnati game. My prediction, 42-35. Thought it was going to be some kind of shootout, right? Well, Pitt, I guess they saw my predictions and how bad I was reeling from the jump because they came to my stinking rescue. Coming back from a 21-point deficit. Pat Narduzzi and the boys, they stole one. This is literally robbery. They stole one 28-27 out there in Cincy. Eli Holstein had another strong performance, especially towards the latter part of the game, where he threw for 302 yards and 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception. And Pitt had 498 yards of total offense to Cincinnati's 449. Now, Pitt did give up 298 yards passing and 3 touchdowns themselves. And it's kind of interesting for a Pat Narduzzi team to be winning football games because of their offense while the defense tries to find itself. That puts me at 2-2 straight up in week 2. And then as Pitt tries to rescue me, leave it up to the ACC boys in Cal to just pull one out of their stinking hat and completely mess things up for me again. I had Auburn 31-17 easy, right? But then in comes the newcomers, like I said, to hold it down against the SEC and mess up my score prediction for the week again. Cal gets the job done down there 21-14. And Mendoza, who didn't play very well in the home opener against UC Davis, throws for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, they still could not run the football. They were only able to rush the ball 101 yards. But they were able to make just enough plays to get the W. Cal held Auburn to 286 total yards at their stinking house, man. And for them to go across the country, which they're going to be doing a ton of very often this year, that's an impressive win, man. And it moves me back under 500 to 2-3 on the week. Then we got Duquesne at Boston College. My prediction, BC blowout. And Castellanos threw for 234 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half. And they beat the brakes off of Duquesne 56-0 after generating 563 yards of total offense. And they only allowed the Dukes 137. So anytime a team whose name is the Dukes gets smashed, that's good in my book, bro. And that's how you handle an FCS team. Easy money. I'm back to 500 at 3-3. Next up, Jacksonville State at Louisville. My prediction, Cards 56-17. Another easy one to get me over the hump. Louisville beats the Jacksonville State Gamecocks 49-14 behind Tyler Show's 349 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. And then Louisville also had 234 on the ground with 5 rushing touchdowns there as well. 611 yards of total offense. Cards were big in another tune-up. That puts me at 4-3 for the week. And then we talk about my boys out there in Chapel Hill. Charlotte visits Kenan Stadium. My prediction, 38-13 Carolina. And if it wasn't for Carolina's second-string defense, I would have hit that thing right on the button because it was 38-13 with about 7 minutes left. Connor Harrell goes 16 for 25 for 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and 1 interception in his Kenan Stadium QB1 debut. Now, it wasn't always clean, but we know that Connor is green. The more repetitions that he gets, the slower the game will become, and he will continue to grow as the leader of this offense. Now, the defense was once again stout against the run. They only allowed 49 yards on 25 carries, but a potential cause for concern was the fact that the 49ers were able to hit on some chunk plays over the top. They threw for 309 yards a week after only throwing for 193 yards against JMU at home. Have got to get that fixed, bro. There's no reason for Charlotte to come into Kenan Stadium and throw for over 300 yards. Now, Carolina's also been hit with the injury bug already. Max Johnson, Blasky went out in the first. Omarion and Nesbitt didn't play in the second half. Kamen Rucker's out a couple weeks after surgery. But they got the job done. And that puts your boy at 5-3 on the season after that 38-20 win. Next up, Marshall of Virginia Tech. My prediction, Virginia Tech 34-24. Now, this was a workmanlike game for the Hokies. Nothing sexy, but they got the job done. They walk out of Lane Stadium with a 31-14 win over Marshall, where Kyron Drones only threw for 130 yards and a touchdown, but Tootin averaged 5.5 yards per carry with 22 carries for 120 yards and a touchdown. Virginia Tech held the Thunder and Herd to only 278 yards of total offense, but they were only able to generate 338 yards themselves. They're still a work in progress out there in Blacksburg, but I picked the Hokies. They got the job done. That moves your boy to 6-3 on the week. Next up, FAMU at Miami. My prediction, Miami blowout. And that's exactly what happened. The Canes follow the Florida whooping in the swamp with a blowout win at Hard Rock, 56-9 over the Rattlers. Cam Ward threw for 3 touchdown passes and ran for another, as Miami had 549 yards of total offense, and they held FAMU to 190 yards. That's exactly what you would expect them to do. If I were to have a power rankings right now in the ACC, Miami would be my clear number 1 through week 2 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That moves my record to 7-3 on the week. Next up, Cal Poly at Stanford. My prediction, 35-24 Stanford. Stanford went 26 for 30 passing with 318 yards and 3 touchdowns as a team in this game to completely blow out Cal Poly 41-7. They were able to generate 437 yards of total offense and hold Cal Poly to 229. And additionally, they had a punt return for a touchdown to blow the doors wide open off of this one. The Stanford Cards get the W, and that puts me at 8-3 on the week. Next up, we got Virginia Wake Forest. This was going to be one of the tougher ones to predict. My prediction, Wake Forest 34-31. Anthony Calandria goes 33 for 43 for 357 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions to lead the Hoos to a comeback win over the Deacs out there in Winston-Salem. Now, UVA only mustered 73 yards on the ground, but they didn't need to. They didn't need to have a good running game. Malachi Fields was electric. He had 11 receptions for 148 yards and a touchdown, and it didn't matter that the Deacs outgained UVA by over 100 yards of total offense. Now, for Wake Forest, Hank Backmeyer threw for over 400 yards and a touchdown, and Damon Claiborne had 2 touchdowns rushing, but they couldn't hold on as Grady Brosterhouse had a 1-yard touchdown run with 2:07 left to steal the win. That moves my record to 8-4 with UVA coming back over Wake Forest. Now, moving on to our last 2 games, App State at Clemson. Some people thought that this was going to be another maybe trap game for Clemson. Nah, didn't happen, bro. Dabo Swinney and the Fighting Tigers, they took it to the Mountaineers. Here's a number for you, 712. You say, what's that, Russ? That is the total offensive yards that they put up on the Mountaineers in a 66-20 smashing of a team that's supposed to be gritty and tough. Klubnik threw for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Phil Moffa had 118 yards on 10 carries with a touchdown, just like I figured. Clemson's going to be okay. You cannot use the Georgia game or use the Georgia Bulldogs as a measuring stick to where your program is. They're different right now. Nobody is Georgia, okay? They're just different, all right? And that leads us to the final game of the ACC slate, bro. And I told you guys that this one could get ugly. I just didn't realize how ugly it was going to be, bro. NC State and Tennessee out in Charlotte. 51-10. Tennessee had 460 total yards of offense, and the Wolfpackers had 143. Goodness, their one touchdown was a stinking pick 6. On the ground, the Vols had 249 yards rushing, so they torched that NC State front 7, and NC State had 39. The Vols beat up on State like NC State was an FCS team, and that is all shade aside. My shade video was already stinking made. This is being outclassed, and it was embarrassing to the Atlantic Coast Conference. Grayson McCall, he went 15 for 22 for 104 yards and an interception. Jordan Waters had 7 rushes for -4 yards. Even KC was held in check, aside from a gadget play. Now, in all honesty, here's the simple fact of the matter. I still think that NC State is a decent football team. and they're one of the better teams in the ACC. But to lose that way, when all off season, the media and the fans have bounced the idea that the Wolfpack could get into the playoff, is wild. NC State's loss is made even more sweet, though, because it moves my final record for the week to 10-4. So your boy gets in double digits, man. That makes me 25-7 on the year straight up, and it brings my winning percentage down, unfortunately, to 781 on the season. Now, before we get out of here, let's look at the updated ACC rankings, and they are as follows. Boston College, Syracuse, and UVA are all 2-0, 1-0 in conference. Number 23, Georgia Tech goes to 2-1, 1-1 in conference, followed by Cal, Puke, number 22, Louisville, number 12, Miami, North Carolina, and Pitt, who are 2-0 with no conference games to date. SMU is 2-1. Clemson, NC State, Stanford, and Virginia Tech are 1-1. And Wake is 1-1, 0-1 in conference. Followed by Florida State at the bottom at 0-2, with both L's coming in conference play. So, you let me know what you think about the Week 2 outcomes down in the comments section. ACC football family, is your team up or are they down? Did they stub their toe, or did somebody take their man card like the Wolfpack? If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and we will catch you on the next one, fam.